Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. One much louder. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 Srimad Bhagavatam, 6th Canto, Chapter 5, text number 38. Evam tvam niranukrasho. Evam tvam niranukrasho. Balanam matibiddare. Parsada maje charasi. Yasoha nirapatrapaha. Evam tam niranukrasho. Balanam matibiddare. Parsada maje charasi. Yasoha nirapatrapaha. Evam tam niranukroso. Balanam matibiddare. Parsada maje charasi. Yasoha nirapatrapaha. Next. Evam tvam niranukroso. Balanam matibiddare. Parsada maje charasi. Yastoha nirapatrapaha. Evam tvam niranukroso. Balanam matibiddare. Sada maje charasi. Yasoha nirapatrapaha. Evam tvam niranukroso. Balanam matibiddare. Sada maje charasi. Yasoha nirapatrapaha. Evam tam niranukroso. Balanam matibiddare. Sada maje charasi. Yasoha nirapatrapaha. Ladies. Evam tam niranukroso. Balanam matibiddare. Parsada maje charasi. Yasoha nirapatrapaha. Evam tvam niranukroso. Balanam matibiddare. Parsada maje charasi. Yasoha nirapatrapaha. Translation. Prajapati Daksha continued, thus committing violence against other living entities and yet claiming to be an associate of Lord Vishnu, you are defaming the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You needlessly created a mentality of renunciation and innocent boys. Therefore you are shameless and devoid of compassion. How could you travel with the personal associates of the Supreme Lord? Please repeat. Prajapati Daksha continued, louder with some enthusiasm. Thus committing violence against other living entities, yet claiming to be an associate of Lord Vishnu. You are defaming the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You needlessly created a mentality of renunciation in innocent boys, and therefore you are shameless and devoid of compassion. How could you travel with the personal associates of the Supreme Lord? Everyone please. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishnapastaya Budale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Shamaniti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Devi Sesha Shanyavari Paskajadi Satarane Om Akinat Marindasya Gina Gina Shalakaya Kaksun Minitam Gena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manubhistam Stapatam Gena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dharati Svapadanteham Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Jita Parakamanam Sri Gurum Vaishtavanscha Sri Rupam Sagajatam Sahagana Gunitannitam Samsajaivam Sadvaitam Savrutam Parajana Saitam Sri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakanitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kanda Radha Kanda Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Shivano Situ Devi Pranamami Haripare Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishivano Suta Devi Pranamami Haripare Vanjakapa Grubhascha Kripa Sindhyo Bevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Joya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So for continuity, and everyone might not have been here in the last few classes, I will read some of the previous verses to give us context here. Going back to text 36, Prajapati Daksha said, Alas, Narada Muni, you wear the dress of a saintly person, but you are not actually a saint. Indeed, although I am now in Grihastha life, I am a saintly person. Is that false ego or what? Puffed up, Dr. Frog. By showing my sons the path of renunciation, you have done me an abominable injustice. It'd be hard to imagine someone using worse blasphemy on a sadhu than the words that Prajapati Daksha is saying. Text 37, then Prajapati Daksha said, My sons were not at all free from their 3 debts. Indeed, they did not properly consider their obligations. O Narada Muni, O personality of... Oh my God, this is terrible, terrible offenses he's making. This is terrible blasphemy, the worst possible blasphemy. O Narada Muni, O personality of sinful action. Can you imagine saying to a self-realized soul, to a Nitya Siddha, eternally liberated devotee, whose heart is filled with Krishna Prema, to give such harsh blasphemy? It's amazing that he survived that at all. Because he's still up there on the heavenly planets, you know, and he's still a devotee of Lord Vishnu, but saved by the mercy of the Vaishnavas. You have obstructed, of course, obstructed means you have stood in the way of their progress towards good fortune in this world and the next, because they are still indebted to the saintly persons, the demigods, and their Father. Of course, except for the debt to saintly persons, this is mundane. Indebted to the demigods and their Father. Okay, that's part of Dharma, but try to understand those are sub-religious principles. As you know, sub means below, like submarine. Sub-religious principles. Okay, they're included in Dharma. Fine. But now we understand, by looking at these statements, by Daksha, why Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Sarva Dharma Pritchajam Mamekam Saranam Bhaja. Everyone please, loudly. Sarva Dharma Pritchajam Mamekam Saranam Bhaja Aham Tvam Sarvapapebhyo Moksha Yasa Mavasujaha. So, therefore, what he's saying, even the so-called debt to the devas, there is some debt for materialistic persons, certainly. Otherwise, they can't get rain, they can't get grains, they can't get air, they can't get sunlight, or sun meaning progeny also. But still, this is mundane in comparison to the debt to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that's why Krishna says, Sarva Dharma. Sarva Dharma. Every kind of Dharma. You name a Dharma, forget it. Sarva. Now, Krishna is very fond of this word Sarva. If you look up how many times Krishna uses the word Sarva in the Bhagavad Gita alone. Sarva. Winner takes all. Like the, some of you may have seen old Western gambling matches, and there's a green felt table and there's a hook and there's these plastic chips. Kali Yuga, it used to be gold coins, like when Rukma was gambling with Balaram, and he lost, but the voice in the sky said that he couldn't accept anyways. Voice in the sky said Balaram won. Anyways, so they're stacks of coins, gold coins. Do you realize that it would amount to billions, but the last before Rukma got killed, the last round of the gambling match would have amounted to billions of dollars in 2015. Do you realize that? Do you know that, Prabhu? Yes, no? You do know that. Billions of dollars in gold coins right there on the table. Because after all, money was worth something in those days, not pieces of paper. Prabhupada roars Nrsimha Guru against his pieces of paper concept. So, in debt is there. Debt to the devas is there, but why does Krishna dare to say, Sarva Dharma Prijajam Mamekam Saram Brajam? Why does he dare to say, surrender unto me and give up all other dharmas? Because worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead covers all the other obligations. But Daksha, being in the mode of ignorance, he could not understand this point. Neither could he recognize a self-realized soul, a saint. So, these obligations are all taken care of by worship of the Supreme Lord. There are no, just like we are not really doing worship of devas as a separate activity. We don't have deities, murtis of devas in our ISKCON temples. Although I have to say, since this is being internationally broadcast, there are some ISKCON temples where murtis or devas are creeping in, you know. So the point is that actually Prabhupada never established that, you know, because worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even including worship of Sita, Ram, Lakshman, Hanuman, all this kind of worship of the Supreme Lord, automatically all the devas are inside of a Mahabhagavat. What to speak of the Supreme Lord? King Venu, you know, he was demented. He was a madman, you know, but an ultimate demon. He stopped all the jugnas, the sacrifices, everything. He was completely mad. And he accused the Brahmins, you don't even know the Shastra. You're only posing as being saints. You're only posing as Brahmins. I know the scripture better than you, you fools. He was also, actually, he was a worse offender than Daksha, we must admit. You know, he was a worse offender than Daksha, you know. You don't even know the conclusion of the Shastra, because Shastra says that all the devas reside in the body of the king. Rascals, just worship me and stop. And he's ordered, and he forcefully stopped the worship of the devas. Just worship me. Ooh, is that the false ego or what? You know. So against that backdrop, we see what a huge offender Daksha was a huge offender. I no doubt from time to time he probably still makes aparadhs, most likely. Can't say for sure. But Sakama devotee means full of material desires, not pure devotee. So again, today's verse, Prajapati Daksha continued, thus committing violence against, he's saying to Narada. He's the one that's committing the violence, not Narada. Because words of blasphemy are counted as violence as much as using a steel weapon. Especially against a Vaishnav. Suicide. Thus committing violence. He's accusing Narada of violence. Sadhus never commit unauthorized violence or adharmic violence. Kshatriya kings, of course, they had to do violence. That was Arjuna's doubt. He didn't want to do violence. But Krishna redefined what is the dharma of violence. That's the setting of Bhagavad Gita that Krishna is redefining for him. Give up this mundane conception. Fight for the sake of fighting, he tells Arjuna. You're Kshatriya, you know. So for Rajarshis, saintly kings, and for saintly Kshatriyas, then fighting is there. But otherwise, Brahmanas, they're not supposed to be fighters. And actually, when a Brahman takes the position of a fighter, that's something unusual. It is not the normal thing. So, Brahmanas are supposed to be peaceful, and all the qualities are listed of 16th chapter, good qualities of a Brahmana. So he continues, you needlessly created a mentality of renunciation in innocent boys. This we've heard before. No, we will hear in the 7th canto. This is what Hiranyakashipu was accused. Just see how demoniac. This is the position that Hiranyakashipu was taking against Prahlad. Same mentality. You are defaming the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You needlessly create a mentality of renunciation in innocent boys. And therefore you are shameless and devoid of compassion. So this is, you know, anybody know what a Japanese kabuki mask is? It's black on one side and white on the other, and they switch them around according to what role they're playing, you know. Anyways, dark side, darkness. This is complete tamagun. Devoid of compassion, to say that against a Mahabhagavat is incredible, because they are compassion personified. We have seen and continue to see in our own Srila Prabhupada unlimited compassion. How could you travel with the associates of the Supreme Lord? He's saying, you don't even deserve association of devotees, Daksha is claiming. Okay, purport. The mentality of Prajapati Daksha still continues even today. When young boys join the Krishna consciousness movement, their fathers and so-called guardians are very angry at the propounder of the Krishna consciousness movement. Propounder means teacher, of course. I get used to, changing big words to smaller words, but preaching in India, but maybe all of you know these big words, but it's my habit now, did you know what propounder means? You did. But you're above average, but I know that many well-educated IYF boys, they would not be able to say what propounder means, so because it's high-class English language. So propounder means presenter, teacher. Their fathers and so-called guardians are very angry at the propounder of the Krishna consciousness movement. That means Prabhupada, of course. Because they think their sons have been unnecessarily induced to deprive themselves of the material enjoyments of eating, drinking, and merrymaking. Like sometimes in India, nowadays it's very common that the young men in their between age 18 and 22 or so, they're keeping their hair not hippie long, but we call it, big shocks of hair, and maybe now mustache, maybe beard. This kind of stuff is in vogue now, for the youth of India, all around the world actually. And so then they get involved with Krishna consciousness. And so the devotees say, you need to cut your hair. They don't say shave your head. Of course, he's living at home with somewhat hostile parents, so he can't tell him to shave your head. So the devotees tell him, get a haircut. So he goes and get a haircut, and he shaves, and he's clean shaven. And then he stops going to the cinema, and he stops watching television. And his parents freak. What happened to you? You were such a nice boy. Now, because he's cut his hair instead of a mop head, we call it in America, a mop head, just messy, this way, that way, unshaven beard, and, sloppy dressing, all these things, tamagun, But then when he cleans up and becomes sattvic, his parents, what happened to you? What happened? Oh, it's those Hare Krishnas. Oh, they have brainwashed too. Of course, I don't know what year Srila Prabhupada wrote the purport here, but there was the anti-cult movement in America where they were actually, demons were capturing devotees and dragging them away, putting them in barbed wire concentration camps, and they would take them. It cost $10,000 to hire a deprogrammer. You had to have some bucks, that's what they charged per head. And so then they used to drag them off, and so since they had plenty of money, then they would take them by, probably by bus, always in custody, not chained, they couldn't do that, but with gundas, and they would take them to the Midwestern United States, to some backward area where the sheriff is what we call in America rednecks. That means they are demons. The kind of guys that carry their shotguns. I mean, in the U.S. it's very common, Montana, these other areas of the Middle West, and they drive pickup trucks with a shotgun rack on the back, and they kill deer on site and so forth. This is the countryside in America. So they take them out to some isolated area where the sheriff was a Rakshasa. And they would build concentration camps out there and keep the devotees as prisoners. This is real history. Real history. I know about it because I used to work for 5 years. During the deprogramming crisis, I worked in the BBT legal office, and we would get involved with counteracting the deprogrammers. It was a very dark hour in the history of our movement. It did a lot of damage to our reputation in America, although things have mellowed out now. But actually, we created that to some extent because devotees were too fanatic. They were instructed not to call their parents, not to visit their parents. That was why the parents became so furious. You know, that is not done in preaching by responsible devotees. Hopefully not anymore. There might be pockets of fanatics in ISKCON, but generally speaking, because we have in many larger temples in their counseling system now, devotees realize the anti-preaching. Because we created these demons in one sense, because there was no reason why they had to attack. On the other hand, the exact opposite of the wrong model that I've just described, Srila Prabhupada instructed Brahmananda and Gargamuni when they went home to visit, not only they should go home and visit their mother, but they should offer obeisances to their mother. Prabhupada told them they should offer obeisances because she was very critical. You've taken both my sons. She wasn't a demon. She was just, an attached mother. Just like many Indian mothers are not demons. They're just attached to their sons. They don't want to see their sons with shaved heads. That is their greatest fear, Their greatest fear is if their son gets involved with the Hare Krishna, he's going to run away from home and become a Hare Krishna. So this is a very old contest going on between the Vaishnavas and the demons. So Daksha, being a Sakama devotee, this addiction to sense gratification can make even a devotee into a demon. Please download that. We have seen in our own movement how attachment to sense gratification, attachment to money, attachment to fame, attachment to honor, Patishta, position, can turn even a wonderful, dedicated devotee into a demon. Temporarily, of course. But then they're cut down by time. They can do it only so long. But then at some point they're cut down, just like Shishupal. So Shishupal knew, his mother knew that Krishna was going to kill him. But of course, like any mother, she was attached to her son. Just like even Gandhari was attached to Duryodhana, very attached to Duryodhana. She knew he was doing wrong. She knew he was committing adharma. She knew he was doing sinful things. But still she tried to protect him from death. By that famous pastime in which she asked him to come naked. But Krishna appeared in the palace. Oh, my dear Duryodhana, where are you going? You're going? You're naked. This is very unusual. He's quite embarrassed. He's no friend of Krishna, but he's embarrassed anyways. He says, well, actually, my mother asked me to come see her like this, so, in those days, mother's word was law. So Krishna says, oh, you can't go in front of your mother naked. At least you have to wear kopans. So then, it's the only time in the entire Mahabharata that he surrendered to Krishna. So he surrendered that instruction, he put on kopans, and then he went to see his mother. And so then he enters the queen's quarters. She says, Duryodhana, is that you? Yes, mother. Now, because mother's word was law in those days, she didn't ask. Did you come naked as I ordered you? She didn't ask. Because she presumed that he would be 100% obedient, which modern Indian mothers, they still have that concept, that their son should, isn't it, Prabhu? That their son should be blindly obedient, never mind if the mother's a Rakshasa, meat eater, but they should obey, son should obey, because that's Indian tradition. Okay, fine, it was Indian tradition, and it was for saintly persons. First of all, you become saintly like Draupadi. Then your word can be followed blindly. But first of all, you become like Draupadi, that's all. So it never crossed Gandhari's mind that Duryodhana would disobey. It wasn't an option. It never crossed her mind. So then, for the first time since her marriage, betrothal actually, she took off the band around her eyes. Because that severe tapasya, she got incredible, immense Shakti. And so then, she immediately saw, she wasn't blind herself, she put that on as her dutiful respect and submission to her husband, Dhritarashtra, because he was blind. So then she took it off for the first and only time, the blindfold. And she saw that Duryodhana was standing there with kopins on. She exclaimed, "Oh son, what have you done? What have you done? I told you to come naked. Why have you come with kopins? Why have you done like this? Oh, why? Why have you done like this?" And then he says, sheepishly, he says, "Well, mother, on the way I came across Krishna and he told me that I should not go naked in front of my mother, so at least I should wear kopins. So I put them on because Krishna told me to." At that moment, the queen understood, oh, my son is doomed. There's no way that he's going to survive this battle. She knew that Krishna has intervened, Krishna will always intervene. Oh, my son will not survive. She knew it at that moment, that the will of Krishna would prevail. You see? So, this business, demoniac mentality, my point is, the demoniac mentality, even devotees we see develop demoniac mentality. Even today, there is, stealing of ISKCON money going on by persons who wear the dress of devotees, or maybe they don't wear the dress of devotees. Maybe they work in the office and they just embezzle. I mean, I'm not going to say it's widespread, but I'm going to say that this kind of demoniac thing is going on by persons that consider themselves to be devotees, stealing from Krishna. So, of course, they may have to go to hell for that, and then get the benefit for their devotional service, But a point is that this Bhagavatam is full of illustrations of when a devotee acts like a demon. So we have to be very careful to weed out the weeds from the Bhakti Lata Bija, to watch our behavior. Am I ever saying or doing anything demoniac? But actually, the average devotee that goes off and becomes materialistic, becomes puffed up with pratistha position, the average devotee who gets puffed up like that, actually he never looks inside his heart. He never is a big word. He never looks inside his heart, or her heart, you could say these days, but men are still predominant in managing the movement, so we'll say, he never looks inside his heart. How am I doing? But in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, the introspective sage, the person on the path of self-realization must be introspective. Introspective means looking within, holding up the mirror. How am I doing? If you want to be successful in Krishna consciousness, you have to hold up the mirror every single day and look in your heart. How am I doing? How am I treating the devotees? What is my position? Am I hearing about Krishna today? Am I hearing enough kirtan today? What is the quality of my chanting today? Every day. 365 days a year until you leave this body. Then you can succeed in Krishna consciousness. Of this there's no doubt. That's why Prabhupada was so confident at the end of every lecture. And go back home, back to Godhead. And all the devotees say, I think they usually said, I think on the recordings they usually jive. Go back and listen to some Prabhupada recordings. And the devotees say, no, much louder. And the devotees say, like that. There was no prompting required. And so many classes end, Prabhupada said, and you just practice this Krishna consciousness. You go on serving Krishna. You go on chanting 16 round dailies. And you will go back to home, back to Godhead. Go listen to the recordings again. It's called Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada did not have to prompt them. Automatically, try to understand, you see. Automatically. They would exclaim that joyful exclamation of going back to home. You will go back to home, back to Godhead. So, that is not for Sakamar devotees. So Prabhupada continues, karma is fruit of workers think that one should fully enjoy his present life in this material world and also perform some pious activities to be promoted to higher planetary systems. Of course, in the West they don't know this. And of course, they talk about going to heaven. They don't know what they're talking about, with all respects. In the West, the Christians, if they're pious enough, which is a big maybe because there's so few vegetarian Christians, which is the big. Otherwise, there's nothing wrong with Christianity. It's a bona fide religion, and Christ is a bona fide spiritual master. But the problem, this meat-eating is the main problem amongst. And that's why Prabhupada would never go any further in any discussion with a Christian. Never would he go any further. He would always, every single time he would say, your scripture says, thou shalt not kill. Why are you killing the innocent animals? Every time, and he refused to talk any philosophy whatsoever. He wouldn't talk any comparative religions and Bible versus Gita and all that. No! First of all, he wanted, and how many of you seen the film of that French cardinal, Prabhupada, talking with the French cardinal? Everyone should see that. The French cardinal, he talks with a very heavy French accent. So they have to put subtitles because it's hard to understand. He made a complete ass out of himself in Prabhupada's presence. And Prabhupada defeated him, and he was not an honest man. And Prabhupada defeated him completely. And he could not answer Prabhupada's question, your scripture says thou shalt not kill. Why are you killing? Then he says, it is food. We have to have food. This belongs to the how stupid can you get department. Sometimes, Americans used to say, or maybe a reporter would say, there's so many starving Indians who are starving. Prabhupada looked at them with his classic sarcasm, humor, straight-faced, he says, I'm Indian, I'm not starving. Haribol! 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 So materialistic life is seen as something horrible, a life, but the materialist thinks if their sons and daughters don't grow up as materialists, there's a great disaster. But actually, the Chaupadi temple, preaching in India, Chaupadi has perfected the process The young men have to complete their education. They have to get their degree. They even have to go and work at a outside job for some time, just to get an idea what it's all about. And then only are they allowed to come back and live in the ashram. They're very strict. And that solves all these problems of immaturity, you see. And so they make so many devotees. I have heard 40 devotees a year in both Chapuri and Pune. You know, that's like off the charts, you know. So, many parents are not at all happy about their sons becoming devotees. And even the mothers, I counseled for a while in Punjabi Bagh, where I come from, suburb of Delhi. I counseled the IGF for a while because there was nobody else to do it. IGF means ISKCON Girls Forum. There are about 50 young ladies in Punjabi Bagh who are in training programs for becoming more Krishna conscious. But the parents are so paranoid, they presume that every ISKCON temple has a ladies' ashram. Actually, it'd be nice, wouldn't it? You know, to give protection to Vaishnavis on that scale. But the reality is there are hardly any ISKCON temples in the whole world that have Vaishnavi ashrams. There's a Vaishnavi ashram for retired Maharajis in Vrindavan. There's only about 15 women living there. And there's a few miscellaneous ashrams for retired ladies, but there's, as far as for younger women, there's hardly any, you know. So it's a fantasy. They think my daughters, I mean, they go mad with envy of Krishna and fear, paranoia. One of the rasas, one of the unfavorable rasas with Krishna is fear. You know, so they go mad with fear. Oh, maybe my daughter will shave her head and move into a Hare Krishna ashram, you know. You could say that's crazy, it's nonsense, but an emotional mother is not exactly rational, you know. So anyways, this is, but Prabhupada points out, a bhakti yogi is callous to the opinions of the material world. Callous means indifferent, just hardened, doesn't care. The sadhu doesn't care about other people's opinions. He is not interested in traveling to the higher planets, systems of the demigods to enjoy. And so, for Prabodhananda Saraswati Thakur, he says, for a devotee, merging into Brahman is the same as going a hellish life, when life in the higher planetary systems of the demigods is a will o' the wisp, that means flickering, a phantasmagoria with no real existence at all. So, pure devotees are not interested in all these things. Let us all not become a daksha. So I see a lot of senior devotees here, not many who are not exactly kids anymore, not exactly in their 20s anymore. So we have to be careful with time that we don't become puffed up like daksha. Just because we've been practicing for 20, 25, 30, 35 years, that's great. But we cannot become materially attached. We cannot become like daksha. We must just humbly serve the Vaishnavas, like Narottam Das Thakur, Srinivasacharya, our line of saints. That is how they serve. Okay? Anybody have any question? Okay, thank you very much. Yes, Prabhu? You have to say loudly.
Thank you, Maharaj. Maharaj, my question is that the false ego always comes in path of devotion, false ego. When you are doing devotion service, false ego. So how can get rid of it?
How to maintain?
How to get rid of it? How to overcome the false
Sorry, I'm having trouble understanding.
How to get rid of the false ego.
How to get rid of the anarthas?
Yeah, false ego.
Oh, how to get rid of the false ego. That's our entire process of Krishna consciousness. That's Prabhupada's Vani. Everything in Prabhupada's Vani is for that purpose. We don't have to create something new. Of course, with Desha Kalapatra considerations, we can have special programs. Devotees have had added guitars. Even when Prabhupada was on the planet, there was electric musicians, devotees who would. Prabhupada was not thrilled about it, but he allowed, electric guitars and kirtan. So sometimes with Desha Kalapatra considerations, devotees may introduce something that wasn't done thousands of years ago. But basically, Prabhupada's Vani is perfect and complete. It is a complete instruction manual. Like if you buy a computer and you don't know anything about computers, you have to read the manual, isn't it? Unless you're faking it and say, oh, I can do it, I know how to do it. See, a lot of devotees, they just fake it also. Yeah, I can do it, I know what I'm doing, it's fine. Concoction. No, so somebody gets on the computer and says, I can do it, I'm smart, I don't know. Uh-oh, my computer crashed, what happened? So the manual is there, how to do it. So Srila Prabhupada's Vani is a complete and perfect, infallible manual how to do it, how to become Krishna conscious, how to become free from false ego. But at the top, at the pinnacle, at the peak, is Shravanam Kirtanam. If you get sufficient diet of Shravanam Kirtanam, you will become purified. This is the process. Shravanam and Kirtanam, and sadhana. It's a gradual process, doesn't happen overnight, but you have to keep yourself in that kind. We see how many devotees, thousands of devotees around the world don't have proper sadhana. Then they certainly be puffed up. We see many devotees living in ashrams around the world who may even have positions, but no sadhana. You see? Or not no sadhana, weak sadhana. So how can you expect, if you climb your way, claw your way up the corporate ladder in ISKCON to get some pratishta, to get some position, and then you think, now I am a big devotee. I don't need sadhana anymore. I don't need to go see Krishna in the morning in Mangalarti. I don't need to do that because now I am a big devotee. See? Then you're finished. And some people, they go on like that for decades. And they get by, even though they're chanting Namaprabhat, they get by. Sooner or later, the axe comes. The material desires come. Some deviation comes. Some even sinful desires sprout. You see? Because without sadhana bhakti, actually one cannot become free from false ego ever. It's a guarantee. Without sadhana bhakti, it's guaranteed you'll come back again in this material world. Guaranteed. For another birth. Because, let's say, sometimes students in schools, grammar schools, sometimes they're held back in a high school or something like that because they didn't make the grade. They didn't pass the previous grade, and they're held back. And they have to go through that same class again because they failed. I don't know if they still do that. They used to do it in America. Maybe they don't care anymore. Everything's deteriorating. But it used to be the system that sometimes a student would be held back if they didn't pass, instead of just falsely pushing him through the school system. Okay, good luck, goodbye, we're happy to see you, go. They used to sometimes stop them, and they have to take that same class again. So if we don't learn a lesson in this very form of life, then again we have to come back. You see. So don't miss this opportunity. Prabhupada said thousands of times, don't miss this opportunity of this human form of life. Okay, thank you very much. Jagaguru Sri Baba ki jai, Giriraj Govardhan ki jai, Shri Radha Madhava Asasaki ki jai, Shri Mahapanchatattva ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol.
Bhakti Madhurya Govinda Swami Maharaj ki